The laughter in the grand hall of stars was thunderous, echoing through the gleaming obsidian spires of the Zalari Imperial Citadel. Rows of diplomats, admirals, and nobles from across the Galactic Empire raised crystalline goblets in celebration. As the hologram in the center of the chamber projected an image of earth blue-green and fragile-looking. Admiral Krethos, draped in the red and gold mantle of conquest, sneered at the slowly rotating image. "They call this a homeworld?" he said, talons tapping against his goblet. "One ship, one? That is how they defend it?" The court roared in amusement, teeth bared and tendrils twitching with smug delight. It wasn't just the number that amused them. It was the arrogance, they believed. Earth had been offered a place within the Zalari sphere, an invitation wrapped in polite conquest. All Earth needed to do was comply. Share their resources, hand over their strategic orbital space, and become yet another appendage of the great empire. Instead, humans responded with a simple message: we decline, respectfully. Do not approach again. No demands, no bargaining, just that message. And now, their outer colony near Epsilon Theta 9 had been encroached upon by Zalari forces. A skirmish, they called it, a formality. The humans did nothing. No fleet, no declaration. Only one ship appeared unregistered, unaligned with the Galactic Assembly, drifting silently toward the edge of Zalari-occupied space. Krethos spat contemptuously at the holomap. "They are primitives with overinflated myths. Their history speaks of wars, yes, but always with themselves. They have no experience with true empires, no grasp of real power." But among the laughter, one figure didn't join in. Archon Velth, the Empire's oldest war historian, kept his mandibles folded and his gaze fixed on the image of Earth. He had studied them more than anyone else, and something in their silence felt familiar, not cowardice, not indecision, a stillness like a predator waiting for the perfect moment to strike. He remembered the phrase etched onto an intercepted Terran artifact centuries ago, a quote from a long-dead general: "Speak softly and carry a big stick." He had dismissed it once. Now it echoed like a warning. Far away, on the fringe of the Epsilon Theta 9 system, space shimmered and tore open without a ripple of fanfare. A single vessel emerged blacker than the vacuum around it, seamless and without visible engines or insignia. It didn't broadcast a signal. It didn't engage. It just arrived. Zalari patrols quickly surrounded it, scanners probing and coming back blank. It had no identifiable power core, no weapon signatures, no heat signatures at all. The Empire's flagship captain ordered a low-power scan. The probe disintegrated the moment it made contact with the vessel's hull. Back in the Grand Hall, the advisors dismissed the event as a bluff. "Perhaps it's ceremonial," suggested one. "Humans do love symbolic gestures," Krethos agreed. "Let them flaunt their relic. When they see the might of our armada, they'll bow." But the ship didn't move. It didn't blink. It just remained in orbit, watching. 2 days passed. The Zalari began transmitting warnings, then threats. Still no response. Finally, a minor commander, eager for glory, sent 3 interceptors to fire warning shots across the ship's bow. The shots never landed. Mid-flight, the plasma bolts vanished absorbed by an invisible field. The interceptor systems crashed. Communications died. The ships drifted in silence. Then came Earth's only message: "This is your only warning." That was when the first thread of doubt wormed its way through the Empire. The Zalari had conquered thousands of systems. They had enslaved planets, extinguished species, raised moons. But never before had they encountered an enemy so quiet, so unmoved. And now, they realized they knew nothing about this human warship, no blueprints, no tech specs, not even a confirmed designation. Still, pride dictated their response. Pride and fear dressed as defiance. They dispatched a full detachment of 40 cruisers to the Epsilon system. They would seize the lone Terran ship, dissect it, parade it through the capital dot as the fleet approached. Scanners picked up the human vessel's sudden movement. It didn't accelerate. It didn't thrust. It simply changed location, like it had always been in the new position. And another shift, then another, until it stood in front of the fleet, blocking the path to the human colony behind it. The fleet commander gave the order to fire. All 40 ships unleashed coordinated volleys of ion lances, rail slugs, plasma torpedoes. Every projectile disappeared a meter from the warship's hull. There was no explosion, no flare, no flash. They just ceased to exist. And then the Terran ship responded. It did not fire weapons. Instead, every Zalari ship received a message, not in sound or data. It was an image, a human city turned to ash, not a threat. A memory, Hiroshima, a glimpse into human history. Followed by another, trenches. In Europe, firebombings, chemical warfare. A mushroom cloud, not boasting, not bravado, just a timeline. A warning. Then the systems of every cruiser crashed simultaneously. Life support reverted to backup. Weapon systems froze. Navigation spun wild. All done without a single hostile gesture from the human vessel. The commander sent a final transmission to High Command. We are not facing primitives. We are facing something far older than we imagined. Something that survived its own extinction once and came back smarter. Admiral Krethos read the message with shaking hands. The laughter in the Hall of Stars had stopped, for the first time. In centuries, the Zalari Empire did not know what came next, and deep within the heart of the Vindicator, Earth's first response to provocation, a sentient intelligence watched, waited, and calculated. It had not come to destroy. It had come to demonstrate, and its message was only just beginning. Asterisk above the silent graveyard of disabled warships, the human vessel hovered like a shadow of judgment. The Zalari Empire, confident in its unmatched might for centuries, had sent a fleet to make a statement. But instead of triumph, they found stillness, an eerie silence filled with implications they couldn't understand. Not a single human had spoken. Not a single shot had been fired. And yet, 40 of the Empire's finest ships now floated helplessly. Lights dimmed, weapons useless, communication severed. It wasn't an attack. It was a display. Admiral Krethos was no longer sneering. He watched the raw footage from the Epsilon Theta 9 encounter again and again. The moment when the warship designation still unknown moved without moving. The exact second the weapons vanished. The quiet that followed. His mandibles clenched in frustration. The intelligence division still insisted it was a technological bluff, some advanced cloaking and electronic warfare suite. But his instincts, honed across hundreds of conquests, whispered a truth he did not want to hear. This wasn't a bluff. It was a message. A warning. Empire Command convened an emergency council. Velth, the war historian, spoke only once. They've shown us restraint. You must understand humanity didn't unleash their weapon. They merely opened the door and let us peer inside. The council scoffed. One advisor, Saltric, slammed a tendril on the console. So we do nothing, slink away, surrender to one ship? No, Velth replied, but you must treat it as more than a ship. You must ask yourself what kind of civilization builds such a thing and then sends it alone. Meanwhile, on the surface of Epsilon Theta 9, the human colony resumed normal operations. Their planetary defense grid remained dormant. Shuttles continued delivering aid and supplies. Miners returned to their drills. It was as though the entire incident with the Empire had been no more than a passing storm. The colonists did not seem surprised. They acted like they expected Earth to respond with that ship, as if it had happened before, as if this was the protocol. On board the Zalari command carrier just outside Epsilon Theta 9, Captain Threx, one of the few who hadn't lost control of his systems, studied telemetry from the crippled fleet. None of the wrecks had been destroyed. There were no bodies, no damage. Every ship had simply been disabled at a level so precise it was as if the attacker had complete access to their schematics. But the true anomaly was this: each ship still recorded a faint signal in the background noise, almost like a whisper. He amplified it, played it through his private receiver. The voice was in an Earth language English. He used the translator. The words were chilling. "We only fight when we must. We only show our strength to those who ignore our peace. But never mistake mercy for weakness. You have been warned." It wasn't the threat that chilled him. It was the voice. It was calm, sorrowful, almost. As if the humans didn't want war, but had perfected it out of necessity. Back at the Imperial High Command, the Emperor himself ordered a new strategy: send a diplomatic envoy. "We will offer terms, show respect. Let them know the Empire is not without civility." Admiral Krethos objected. "We are the Empire. We do not beg." Velf gave him a sideways glance. "Then perhaps you should have listened to their history before mocking their defense. The humans didn't ask for war, but you gave them every reason to prepare for it." 3 days later, a Zalari diplomatic cruiser, adorned in golden hull, plating and accompanied by a small honor guard, approached the human vessel in orbit. They hailed it on every known frequency. After 3 hours, the human ship responded, not through words, not through data. The Zalari cruiser found itself surrounded digitally. Every file, every system, every communication log on their ship was overwritten with a single file. A historical document, time-stamped and archived by Earth's own government. It was a record of first contact. Not with the Zalari, but with the Dressari, a now extinct race that had once attempted to attack an Earth medivessel 212 years ago. The document ended with 2 images, one of the Dressari fleet, proud and gleaming. The second, an image taken hours later, those same ships broken and smoldering, drifting above a glassed world. The message was unmistakable. Back on the Zalari cruiser's bridge, one diplomat whispered, "They are telling us that they've done this before, that we are not the first, and we will not be the last." That night, while the Empire deliberated on how to respond, multiple observers across the border systems reported strange anomalies. Human ships smaller than the Vindicator class were appearing on long-range sensors, silent, still, watching, no comms, no movement, just presence. An unspoken implication that Earth had not sent their only ship, only their first. On Epsilon Theta 9, one of the colony children asked their teacher, why everyone seemed so nervous. The teacher, a former Navy intelligence officer, knelt beside the child and smiled faintly. Because, little one, the galaxy thinks we're still just a backwater world with old bones and old tech. But they don't know what Earth learned after centuries of war. They don't understand that peace is not our default, it's our choice. And what happens, the child asked, if they keep pushing us? The teacher looked out the window, where the shadow of the Vindicator floated like a silent guardian. Then they'll learn what happens when Earth stops choosing peace. The Empire had underestimated Earth before. That much was now painfully clear. But they still thought they could recover. After all, they were the Zalari dominant for over 4,000 cycles. Civilizations had crumbled beneath their banners. What was one warship against their endless fleets? And yet, nothing about this human vessel fit any logic they knew. After the diplomatic cruiser incident, they escalated their response. A larger fleet was mobilized, not just a show of strength this time, but a genuine force meant to probe, test, and if possible, eliminate the threat. The humans, they reasoned, must have weaknesses. No species builds a single warship without flaws. The Empire deployed 72 ships, 3 dreadnoughts, 25 cruisers, and a myriad of smaller vessels, led by Grand Strategist Elzer Nar himself. But Elzer was no fool. He ordered a fleet-wide blackout of comms to avoid signal tampering. No direct scans of the human vessel, no warnings, no hails. They would strike surgically and retreat if needed. Probe, analyze, then regroup. That was the plan. The moment the fleet warped into the sector, they felt it. A sensation none could explain, a pressure behind the eyes, a vibration beneath the hulls. The human warship, still nameless and without visible power emissions, sat directly between them and Epsilon Theta 9. It hadn't moved. But the system's quantum gravity signatures had shifted slightly, impossibly, as if the ship's very existence bent the local fabric of space. Still, Elzer remained calm. Open with long-range displacers, no approach, no risk. The fleet obeyed. Energy pulses surged through space. As they closed the distance, something extraordinary happened. The pulses didn't just vanish, they reversed. Energy from the Zalari fleet, carefully aimed and tracked, bent back around the warship, not just blocked, but rechanneled, split, and reflected into harmless arcs. One cruiser's shields overloaded immediately from redirected friendly fire. Another lost half its power grid as its own energy signature was fed back into its systems. Elzer stared at the data. It's not absorbing our fire. It's rewriting the rules of engagement. Then, for the first time, the human vessel emitted a signal, not words. A tone. A simple, steady frequency that caused several bridge officers to stagger in place. Their multi-lobed brains overwhelmed by some deeper resonance, like their thoughts had been momentarily replaced with something ancient, foreign, and terrifyingly focused. Elzer's chief tech officer analyzed the tone with trembling claws. "It's not a signal," she whispered. "It's a warning shot. But not through weapons, through concepts. They're showing us what they're capable of doing without actually doing it." The grand strategist hesitated. "Then we escalate. We use the Maelstrom protocol." Across the fleet, fusion cores surged. Each ship began charging the Maelstrom array, a triangulated superweapon meant to tear a hole in space itself, destabilizing any mass caught in the targeted zone. It had never been tested in combat. It had never needed to be. They fired. A beam of light, wider than a dreadnought, split reality in two. Space shuddered. Stars flickered. The human ship vanished inside the rift. A heartbeat passed, then another. For a moment, it looked like success, until the rift began to close, not collapse, but fold in on itself, perfectly controlled. Like a door being shut from inside. And when it did, the human vessel was still there, unchanged, unmoved, unaffected. The Maelstrom shot hadn't just failed. It had been absorbed, redirected, and then used. All 72 ships in the fleet received a flood of visual data, at once Earth's warfare history. But this time, not the past. Simulations. Thousands of predictive combat models showing exactly how the human ship could, if it chose to, dismantle the entire Zalari fleet in 4.3 seconds. It didn't. It sent another message instead. "We ask for peace. We prepare for war. This is your final chance to leave." The weight of that message wasn't just in the words. It was in the knowledge that followed. Files, intercepted through some unfathomable means, from the Empire's own black vaults. Human AIs had cracked into their most classified networks. They hadn't just read Zalari military doctrine, they had improved it. "Impossible," Elzer rasped. "We haven't shared these protocols with anyone." And yet, the humans had already revised them, corrected them, enhanced them, annotated them. This wasn't a ship. It was an Oracle of War. ELZ or made the call. "We retreat, now inform high command. We've provoked a civilization that rewrites physics like its code." As the fleet limped away, barely escaping under emergency full drives, only one transmission was logged by all vessels, a final image from the Terran ship, displayed for 5 seconds before vanishing. A Terran war memorial. Names, faces, stone, silence. a reminder of what humanity had lost in its own wars, and what it would never allow to happen again. Empire now knew humanity wasn't just capable of war. They had perfected restraint, and they had just let the Zalari live. For now. The Zalari High Command convened in bitter silence. News of the fleet's retreat led personally by Grand Strategist Elzernar was unprecedented. Never in the Empire's history had such a force turned away without achieving dominance. Even more disturbing were the files Elzer had transmitted. Encrypted war doctrines enhanced by human analysis, tactical blueprints improved with Terran insight, and that unspoken truth echoing through every corner of the Empire's vast bureaucracy. Humanity hadn't fought back. They had merely demonstrated capability, and even then, only partially. To many, that was worse than war. Still, pride refused to die easily. The Imperial Military Council insisted Earth must have vulnerabilities. Their ship, whatever it was, must have limits, power sources, crew fatigue, a command hierarchy. Even gods needed fuel. So the Empire changed its approach. They wouldn't go after the warship. They would go after Earth itself. It was audacious, risky, and deeply sacrilegious by the Empire's own doctrine of dominance. No civilization had ever dared strike at the homeworld of a spacefaring species without total assurance of victory. But the Zalari were cornered not by brute force, but by uncertainty. And uncertainty was the one enemy they feared most. Plan was precise. A stealth fleet would bypass known Terran defense satellites by threading the gravity shadows of Jupiter's moons. Specialized AI-guided corvettes would launch targeted EMP warheads into Earth's orbital infrastructure. No mass casualties, just a global power outage, a show of control. A message to humanity: you are not untouchable. The infiltration proceeded flawlessly. No resistance, no alarms. Earth's orbital defenses seemed blind. Then the anomalies began. First, the Corvette AI systems experienced time lag. Not much, barely a fraction of a second, but enough to throw off sync. Then came the phantom power signatures. Systems reported dozens of Terran vessels where there were none. The AI flagged it as sensor ghosts. But the crew grew uneasy. When the first EMP warhead failed to detonate, it triggered a full diagnostic. What they found wasn't a mechanical error. It was an override. By something inside their own systems, human code. Subtle, elegant, embedded like dormant seeds. The moment the warheads were activated, they had already lost control. Then came the interference event. All corvettes in orbit, regardless of position, reported a complete loss of gravitational calibration. Not weaponry, not propulsion. Gravity. The artificial gravity fields inside each ship twisted suddenly, as if being reprogrammed. Several crew members were killed instantly, crushed against ceilings, imploded in their suits. A clean surgical move. No explosions. No counterfire. Just quiet, brutal precision. On board Earth's orbital monitoring station, a Terran analyst logged the entire exchange. He leaned back in his chair and sipped his coffee. "Another ghost fleet gone?" asked his colleague. He nodded. "Seventh one this cycle. They're getting smarter, though. Took 'em a full minute longer to die this time." From the shadows of Luna's dark side, the Terran Defense Directorate watched in silence. Unlike the galaxy's great navies, Earth didn't rely on flashy patrols or massive fleets. They operated like the black between the stars, unseen, ever-present, and impossible to outmaneuver. Each failed incursion fed the Terran AI defense matrix more data. Each tactic added a new layer of countermeasure. And while the Empire threw ships and bodies into the void, Earth didn't even flinch. On Zalari Prime, the mood had turned from confidence to dread. The Emperor ordered a full halt on any further attacks. "We have awakened a force we do not comprehend," he admitted in private. "We must preserve what is left." But it was already too late. Humanity had been watching. They let the Empire believe they'd escaped the failed Earth assault. They let them regroup. They even allowed the Imperial dreadnought Vorakthul, the pride of their core fleet, to return to the shipyards of CYGNAR-4. Then the warning came, not through broadcast, not through diplomats, through absence. A day after the Vorakthul docked, it went silent. No alerts, no alarms. The ship was gone. Still physically present, but no systems, no power, no crew life signs. Every scan showed a fully intact ship, but it was hollow. A boarding team was sent in. What they found chilled even the hardened Zalari veterans. The entire ship had been scrubbed. Not destroyed, sterilized. No blood, no damage, no remains. Every console displayed the same message. We don't start wars, but we finish them. Empire-wide panic followed. Now even the most defiant commanders began to question reality. Who were these humans? How had they taken the flagship without resistance? More importantly, what else could they do that no one had seen yet? Back on Earth, the Vindicator-class warship, the same one that had disabled the First Fleet, hovered at the edge of known space. Not moving. Not signaling. Just waiting. Not as a threat. As a promise. A whisper carried across secure quantum band frequencies from the human High Marshal. Every time they send a fleet, we send a message. Let them wonder what happens when we stop sending messages. The Zalari Empire, in all its history, had never lost a war. But now, their greatest fear wasn't defeat. It was that they no longer understood what victory even meant. Asterisk. In the shattered silence of the Imperial war chamber, the high brass argued behind sealed alloy doors, their voices rising above the whispering hiss of atmospheric vents and power relays. Panic had turned into paranoia. They had underestimated humanity. Worse, they had underestimated what humanity had become. A predator species that had somehow transcended its instincts without shedding them. A civilization that still remembered what it meant to lose, and what it meant to make sure it never happened again. The loss of the dreadnought Vorakthul wasn't just a military defeat. It was a metaphysical one. No casualties, no wreckage, just silence. The humans hadn't even claimed responsibility. Not formally. And that silence screamed louder than any broadcast. Desperate to reassert control, the Empire enacted protocol cauterize a galaxy-spanning lockdown of information, movement, and military intelligence. If humanity's real weapon was information asymmetry, the logic went, then controlling the flow of knowledge would contain the threat. But that idea didn't hold. Not when Earth's reach was already inside. The Council had no idea how deep the infiltration ran until the Malix event, a remote mining station orbiting a dead moon in the dredges far from any known Terran activity, sent out a distress signal. When the patrol ship arrived, the station's entire crew had already surrendered. Not to invaders, to each other. No coercion, no violence. Just the slow unraveling of trust, paranoia erupting like wildfire. Security footage showed them watching video loops from Earth, real Earth, history, Auschwitz, Hiroshima, Chernobyl, Vietnam, the Siege of Grozny. But the feeds were intercut with one additional segment, a classified Zalari military simulation. One that showed their empire losing to Earth in only 6 days. No one knew how that footage had gotten there. But by the time the patrol ship arrived, the crew had erased every file, smashed every databank. They had chosen to forget rather than live with the knowledge. It was a psychic blow the Empire wasn't prepared to face. The Emperor convened a closed, emergency council of his most trusted strategists, intelligence lords, and technomancers. We must assume, he said, that humanity has moved beyond traditional warfare. They do not need fleets to defeat us. They need only belief, our belief that they can. Asterisk, some argued for negotiation, others for full retreat. One general stood, a war hero, Battle-scarred. Eye replaced with a mechanical orb forged from the Empire's oldest alloy. If they can corrupt belief, then we must anchor it in something undeniable, in fire, in glory, in ancient power. He proposed activating the Null Star. An ancient relic of pre-Empire civilization. A forbidden superweapon buried beneath the crust of Varnak 3. Not a cannon, not a bomb, but a gravitational anomaly, a stellar-scale event harnessed and directed with dark matter generators. The Null Star did not destroy planets. It unwrote them. With enough charge, it could erase a system from gravitational memory, making it impossible to re-navigate or even remember. The ultimate act of censorship. A literal galactic redaction. The target, Earth. The cost, 1/6 of the Empire's remaining energy reserves. It was madness. And it was approved. As they began the months-long preparation, Earth waited. Or so the Empire believed. But in the unlit edges of charted space, the Warden stirred. A ship built in legend. A vessel not registered in any fleet, not housed in any port. Said to be captained by an entity once human, now something more. The Warden received no orders. It was bound only by one law. If the signal is sent, the Warden moves. And the signal had just been sent. Somewhere between Andromeda's edge and the Shadow Rift, the Warden came online. No engines, no launch. It simply was, and then it moved a blink through quantum phase space, arriving at Varnak 3's outer edge within seconds. The Empire never saw it approach. The moment they fired up the Null Star's core, it responded. One pulse, one singularity-laced burst of Takin. Light aimed not at the Null Star, but at the minds of those near it. Everyone on the Varnak base, engineers, soldiers, technicians, fell to the floor screaming. They saw something. What exactly? No one would ever know. But the few who survived were no longer themselves. Silent, unresponsive. And when they were examined, every neural pathway in their brain had been rewired. A single word was carved into their retinas, readable only under spectrographic light. No, it was not a command. It was a verdict. The Null Star was permanently shut down, not destroyed, sealed. Humanity had made its second point. You may think you wield ancient power. We are the reason those powers were forgotten. The Galactic Empire, for the first time in its vast reign, lost its will to retaliate, because retaliation now meant provoking something older than fear. Now, even the boldest admirals whispered legends about the Warden, about Earth's quiet wrath, about weapons that weren't fired but understood, and battles that ended before they began. And the humans? They didn't gloat. They didn't broadcast. They just waited, because they knew the Empire would try again. And when they did, Earth would not send warnings anymore. Silence ruled the galactic center as the Imperial fleet assembled. Not a signal was broadcast. Not a command was spoken aloud. Tens of thousands of ships, dreadnoughts and cruisers, carriers and destroyers, all drifted in formation like armored bones waiting for resurrection. The Emperor himself had decreed it. This would be the final show of dominance. No more infiltration. No more psychological games. They would drown Earth in stars and silence. The fleet's target wasn't Earth itself. That would come later. First, they would strike Kavari's Reach, a Terran research colony orbiting a neutron star remote, under-defended and strategically vital. Intelligence confirmed the presence of human scientists and medical staff, but no warships. Just a soft beating heart, waiting to be crushed. They reached the outer rim of the system with flawless precision. Hundreds of capital ships aligned into bombardment formation, energy banks pulsing with the prelude to devastation. But when they locked onto the station, they found something strange. No shield signatures. No evasive maneuvers. The human station was broadcasting. Not a distress signal. Not a warning. A song. Old Earth music, analog, encoded on open channels, something called Beethoven's Seventh Symphony. It echoed through the coms like a ghost from another era. The Emperor, watching from the command throne aboard the Sovereign Blade, narrowed his eyes. Begin the strike. End the performance. The order was carried out, or so they thought. The moment the first energy lances lit the void, something intercepted them. Not a shield. Not a counter beam. A distortion like light bending in water. The beams vanished before reaching the target, drawn into some invisible funnel. Some event horizon crafted from artificial gravity and chaos mathematics. And then, as the last echoes of Beethoven's finale faded, the void behind the human station opened. The humans hadn't sent a fleet. They hadn't built a battalion. They had sent one ship. It had no name. No markings. It shimmered like obsidian dipped in starlight. Shaped like a spear with no end. Larger than the largest dreadnoughts, but moving with the grace of thought. Its surface pulsed with quantum-layered geometry that defied scanning. Every Imperial sensor, optical, thermal, gravitational, failed. The ship registered as a negative space, an absence. A void. And then it spoke. No words. Just emotion, rage compressed into data, fury sculpted into song. The entire Imperial fleet felt it in their bones, their blood, their breath. A psychic weight dropped across every mind in that armada. A single collective thought echoed into them. You knew what we were, and you dared. The attack began. Without movement. The nameless Terran ship didn't launch missiles. It rearranged space. One by one, Imperial ships folded in on themselves, not in fire, but in geometry. Hulls curled like paper into higher dimensions, vanishing with an eerie pop as though plucked from the timeline. Some tried to retreat. Others tried to ram it. All failed. One Imperial dreadnought fired a nullifier burst meant to cancel energy. Signatures in a wide cone. The human ship responded by duplicating itself. For 0.002 seconds, there were 3 identical ships. Then one vanished. Then 2. Then 1 again. It wasn't evading. It was experimenting. 1,000 years of war had not prepared the Empire for this. On board the Sovereign Blade, Admiral Kelkari tore off her command insignia and sent a single message to the Emperor. This isn't a ship, it's a verdict, and we are guilty. By the end of the hour, only 3% of the Imperial fleet remained. Not because they escaped, but because the Terran entity allowed them to. They weren't survivors. They were witnesses, and as they limped away into deep space, they carried with them a final broadcast. One line, repeated in Terran Standard and translated into every known dialect of the Empire. Earth does not seek war, but should you bring war to Earth, then let this stand as our mercy. The message was not a warning. It was an epitaph. Across the galaxy, the story spread, not through official channels, not through the datasphere. It passed from pilot to pilot, from merchant to smuggler, from rebel to noble. The tale of the empires. Defeat not by an armada, but by a single ship and the humans who refused to forget what loss felt like. And deep beneath Earth's crust, where the stars could not see, the Terran High Council reviewed the reports. Not with pride, not with celebration. But with solemn nods. This was not victory. This was the price of being feared, one they were willing to pay, again and again, for peace. But always with the readiness to remind the galaxy of what happens when you mistake human kindness for weakness. And so the war ended not with treaties, but with silence, the kind of silence that fills the void when predators know another apex has returned. The war that never truly began had now officially ended. No formal declaration, no treaty, no procession of surrendering diplomats under banners of truce. The Galactic Empire had simply stopped. Systems that once fed fleets turned their industries inward. Planets that had cheered for conquest went silent. In the halls where emperors once thundered orders, only whispers remained. And among those whispers was one name, repeated not with hatred, nor even with fear, but with something colder. A reverence born of survival. Earth, for centuries, the Empire, had mocked the Terrans, calling them backwater primitives, barely worthy of diplomatic notice. They had laughed at the idea that a species with fewer than 24 core worlds could pose a threat. Even after the initial defeats, they still clung to arrogance. But arrogance is fragile under pressure. And Earth had applied the kind that shattered empires. The survivors of the Kavari fleet, the 3% who had been allowed to return, were never the same. Their minds bore the scars of something they could not explain. They had not seen a battle. Not truly. They had seen a verdict passed down like a god's whisper into the bones of space. A final statement that echoed through every facet of their being. You do not provoke, Earth. And the most terrifying part wasn't the destruction. It was the mercy. Because Earth could have done more. Everyone knew it. The Warden, if that was even. The true name of that horror could have followed them home, turned their homeworlds inside out, collapsed star lanes, silenced entire species. But it hadn't. Instead, humanity had done what no other galactic civilization had managed in eons. They had stopped the Empire without conquering it. They had no desire for territory. No hunger for tribute. They didn't want slaves, or planets, or imperial submission. They wanted only to be left alone. And now, finally, they would be. But stories spread faster than fleets, aboard smuggler ships, in the black markets of fringe moons, in the memory crystals of pirate lords, and roguey-eye archivists. The tale took root. The tale of Earth, of the nameless ship, of the singular confrontation that had altered the course of galactic history without a formal war. Scholars from 1,000 systems debated what it meant. Was Earth truly that powerful? Or had they simply mastered the art of appearing so? But no one could answer with certainty. That was the genius. Because fear, real and raw, doesn't require proof. It requires imagination. And Earth had given the galaxy plenty to imagine. In the shadow of their defeat, the Empire began quietly restructuring, not rebuilding military might. They knew better than to try, but redefining its place in the galaxy, seeking trade instead of conquest, diplomacy instead of subjugation. New generations were taught not to dominate, but to respect. And Earth, curiously, did not exploit this. They didn't press for influence. They didn't move in to control the vacuum of power they'd created. Instead, they simply returned to silence. No broadcasts, no diplomacy tours, no ambassadors waving flags of victory. Only silence, and that ship that's still watching, still waiting, still reminding. For humanity, the battle had never been about pride or revenge. It had been about survival, about never again. The ghosts of their own past, Hiroshima, Nanking, Auschwitz, Rwanda, the trenches of World War I, the hellfires of World War III, they remembered all of it. And they had sworn, long ago, that no one would ever inflict such pain on them again. Not without understanding what it would cost. So they built not just weapons, but warnings, not just ships but sentinels. And while they hoped never to use them, Earth's High Council made it clear, let the galaxy thrive in peace, but should any power reach for our throat, we will respond not with anger, but with certainty. To many, that was even worse. Because anger is predictable, certainty's unstoppable. And so, in quiet corridors of alien academies, cadets now study Terran philosophy. Military students analyze Earth's history, not just tactics, but the psychology of loss and resilience. Galactic poets sing verses of the black ship that cast no shadow, and rebels in distant sectors take heart in the idea that even the mightiest can fall. The Terrans had, without intention, become legend. Not conquerors. Not tyrants. But the last question anyone should ever want to ask. And when they finally answered it, the galaxy would never be the same again. One Empire scout, years later, summarized it best when asked by a reporter what he saw during the Kovari engagement. He didn't describe the technology. He didn't talk about the ship's weaponry, or lack thereof. He only said, "We mocked their defenses." They answered with silence, and in that silence we heard the end of everything we thought we knew. And now, whenever another young power rises, when pride burns too hot, and ambition blinds once more, there's always someone nearby to remind them, "Careful. You don't want to wake Earth."